Now I have it running again.
Okay. Well, I'll just finish that about Chris, and took him to an X-ray, and the short point of it is that it broke his ankle, but it was a clean break, and
Did you do it on purpose?
yes, I did on purpose. In fact, our neighbor, Dr. Gender, had another doctor then in with him, and he was our neighbor, Ron Holmes, and he was the doctor that I saw. He said, "Why weren't you home watching soap operas instead of out taking your kids for a sled ride?" You know. So anyway, because I started bawling, I felt so bad, and so they put a cast on him, and he was too little to have crutches or anything, so he had to go back to crawling. And so he was 18 months old and had been running around, and he had to crawl, but little ones adjust quickly, and he was great. He was fine. And in fact, we had Kirk, your cousin, stay overnight, and you were sleeping in Kathleen's bed, you and Kirk, because she had a double bed. And he, with his cast on, he climbed out of the crib and climbed right up in bed and went to sleep between you and Kirk. And we saw that when we went in to check you guys before we went to bed. Dad took a picture, and we still have that picture of Chris with his cast on sleeping between you two. So it healed fine. It healed fine. So.
Of course, a big part of our story also is the fact that one day we're Michiganians and the next day we are Atlantans, and we wondered how that would be. What a huge jolt, leaving all our family and all our friends and starting fresh. You didn't find it extremely enjoyable at the start, did you?
No. Not when you lived in one place with family and friends for 40 years. But anyway, we knew it was the right thing to do for Dad and our family. And I think it was difficult. Well, this is something. You all went to, except for Kelly. She was young when we moved. She was not quite 3 when we moved to Atlanta. And we were very concerned about the effect it would have on you, Mike, Kathleen, and Chris. You were in 8th grade, Kathleen in 6th grade, and Chris in 4th grade. And you all enjoyed sports and had your friends and everything. And so Dad asked Jim Dyer, who was the principal at Our Lady Good Counsel, about it. And he said, we shouldn't have a worry in the world, that you 3 were all well-adjusted, you were good students, you were athletic, that you would make friends easily and make the adjustment well. So that really helped us. Yeah.
We had a tribute dinner for Jim Dyer because he's such a great principal. And name of Dyer, I said, because you've done so much for so many, they are renaming a part of Michigan after you. They're going to call it the Dyer Straits. And that was, there was no drum roll then either.
What was the thing you put on for the dinner? It was sort of a roast, it was. And a lot of parents at Good Counsel came. It's not the principal?
It's not the school we hate, it's the principal of the thing.
Which he got a big kick out of. But you guys were all busy growing up in Michigan. We used to go to Walloon Lake, to cottages, with Carnies mostly, but also Aunt Kathy and Uncle Bill and their kids would come up, and the water was always cold. Do you want to say how cold it was, Mike?
How cold was it?
Thank you for asking. It was as cold as the seat of the 6th man on a 5-man toboggan.
We used to.
We got to remember Murray Lake too.
Yeah. We used to go up the first week, like the second week in June, as soon as you got out of school.
Sorry, there's a deer back there.
Was it really?
Actually?
Yeah.
Oh.
Wow.
And
we should bring them in here.
Yeah.
you
That's
guys
funny.
used to run, and actually, you all saved your money, and you bought a big, like a lifeboat almost. It was a big, it was a boat. It would accommodate 3 or 4 people. And you saved your money, and you used to go out in that too. but you'd run off the dock and jump in the water, and you'd all say, "Oh, it's so cold." But then you got used to it.
Closer at home was Murray Lake, which was only 10-15 minutes from our home, as you know. And there's a God-made lake and a man-made lake, and we went there every week in the summer. It was really something to be in such a homey environment right past their cornfield. Bill Fishbeck was the new proprietor. We went there on our 50th anniversary also with the family, and the kids said the place hadn't changed in many, many years.
No, I think even Jonathan, who had not seen it before, said that the White House where you change your clothes and they used to sell candy, he said, "Does that look the same?" I said, "Yes, it hasn't changed in probably 50
One
years."
more salute to our kids. Every one of our kids and grandkids went to our recent family reunion in Michigan, driving or flying, primarily
Yes.
driving, all the way back. 72 people arrived, and everybody here set aside their own personal lives to do a family reunion, and we were very more proud than usual even.
Yes, that was great. Something we'll always remember, and I hope you guys will too. Your little ones are pretty little. They won't remember that right now, but anyway, they were there. Anything else?
What else? I mean, there's lots of topics we can go to.
I
We haven't
know.
talked about, your parents, at
Mhm.
all, or your childhoods.
Well,
My father and mother were from Pennsylvania, Frank and Cleo, unusual name Cleo. They were in Pennsylvania, and Dad came here and got a job at that automotive city called Detroit. He got a job with Chrysler Corporation, and then after a while moved over to Ford Motor Company as a cost estimator.
you graduated.
Graduated from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and at that age, in the 1920s or so, graduating from college was a bit of an achievement. Mom did not have the education that Dad did. She was at home watching over kids because her dad had died in a coal mine collapse. So she had to watch over Bill, who then went into the Navy. Gus went into the Navy. Bill went into the Marines because of World War II.
And
So
Dick
then there's also, and Dick,
and Glad.
the Gladys, and and Gertrude. So Mom was acting as an assistant mother in the growing up days. So not that much of an education, but she did what she had to do to help. Coincidentally, Grandma's name was Mimi, just like now we got another Mimi here.
Mm-hmm.
So on the daily side,
Well, I'll tell that, but you.
yeah,
When did they move from Pennsylvania?
about 1928, and
When
then,
he got a job at Chrysler, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the births started coming. My sister Patricia, was born. She went to high school at Mercy High, a bit of a prestigious high school, and she went on to marry an attorney named Chuck Heigl, both of them now deceased. The Heigls had 6 kids. Jack, John Francis Boyle, called Jack, my brother, went to General Motors Institute of Technology, where he became an engineer, and they had a cooperative program where you work 3 months and study 3 months. So he found that interesting in Flint, Michigan. And then I came in there, and I was born in 1940, and went to high school at the University of Detroit High and the University of Detroit itself, where I was editor of the student paper and played some tennis and what have you, and then became a copy boy and then a reporter at the Detroit News. So next came Kathy, Mary Catherine She was born 1946, and the other kids were married or they were gone, so Kathy and I alone at home with a sometimes challenging environment. But in any case, Kathy and I were very close. So she's now married to an attorney also, and they had 2 kids and they're attorneys. So our family is keeping the attorney business going.
I remember you had maybe an uncle who was maybe running the Burroughs Corporation,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and somebody else also was.
It's on your dad's side.
My dad's sister was Alice Britt. Her husband was the chairman of the board of Burroughs. Their son was Lawrence Britt, a Jesuit priest who became president of my university, the University of Detroit. There's a story about him once. Father Britt was addressing 200 students, a dry sense of humor. He was addressing 200 students at U of D, and a student raised his hand and said, "Father Britt, I assume you're aware of the vow of poverty. Why is it therefore today, in 1962, I saw you driving on campus a 1962 Pontiac Grand Prix? Reason, please." Father Britt, never at a loss for words, said, "Reason, reason, reason. Young man, the only reason I can think of is the 63s haven't come out yet."
Didn't you get in trouble with him one time
Oh,
when you were
yes.
editor? Because he was president of the college at University of Detroit.
I was editor of the student newspaper, the Varsity News, and we had a staff meeting, and everyone said, we got to write an editorial. The editorial, the academic achievements of the school are not up to our standards. We want improvement. So let's do an editorial on page 1 of the Varsity News. And it says, "The University of Detroit has the academic atmosphere of a pool room." So there I was in the middle, the only one who's saying, "Hey." So I finally withered, and the paper came out and got a phone call from my cousin, the president of the university. "Tom, can we talk for a minute?" I said, "Yes, I have time." He said, "From now on, I'd like the Jesuit priest who watches over the paper to read everything that goes in there." So, because the head of the paper, the priest, Father Jim Magmer, who later left the priesthood, and a great guy, he did not do what he was told. He gave us the ability to do what we thought was right. So, but it scared me for
So
a
you
while.
had academic freedom.
Yeah, academic freedom.
The University of Detroit was an important place for you. You went to high school and college there.
Correct.
and-
Those Jesuit priests are something. We still are backers of both schools. They are wonderful. They also are the only 2 big institutions that stayed within the city of Detroit. And that is something. And now it's because of its academic achievements at the high school especially, wins lots of awards. Whenever I go to town, I call the alumni office and say, "What's going on? Can I stop by?" And they give me a tour of the school, including the ping pong facility where I used to live.
Did you ever get into any trouble there as a high school student? Or?
No. I was pretty straight arrow.
You're not the one who lit the tennis ball and threw it.
One of my fellow grads went on to Holy Cross University, Mike Schumann. Mike is not going to see this. And they were having a student retreat, and the speaker was talking at the front of the chapel, and Mike Schumann took a tennis ball, rolled it in lighter fluid, lit it, and bounced it down the center aisle, saying, "Here comes the Holy Ghost."
And he got.
He may have left the university. Well, there was another incident, but I really wasn't a part of it, I say. A cafeteria strike. The students at the high school said the food is inadequate, so on Friday, we're not going to eat any of their food. So there was that strike, and so they lose some money on the food, and it didn't go over very well. It wasn't very well thought out. I again was sort of a shy person who.
What was the food like?
Well, I always brought lunch from home, so I didn't even know. I used to, in high school, enjoy the assignments to write essays, because I would write essays with an unusual ending. I talked to a fellow grad a couple of years ago. He said, by the way, I always enjoyed your essays. This is 45 years after I had written them. So I enjoyed the ability, and I heard from Father Tom Radloff that the Jesuit in charge of the class would take my essay and bring it to the lunch hour for the Jesuits to read, and bring it back later. But I was a writer then, and I'm a communicator now.
Didn't you in college, though, start out in pre-dent?
I thought that dentistry would be the thing to do, but I then thought it's the profession where there are the most suicides, because all dentists know nobody wants to see them, and I didn't want any part of that, so I went into journalism, which is a little different from dentistry.
You've always been proud of your teeth as well. Do you want to show them off?
Well, funny you should mention it, if you can do a close-up. I paid an orthodontist a week ago Tuesday $1.35 to straighten my lower front teeth. I think he did a good job, but we'll let your viewers see. I think he did a good job. Some people don't think so, and that's my business, not theirs.
I wanna.
Oh, about teeth? You're going to talk about Mike's teeth?
No,
W-Y-T?
I'll do that later. But while we were on the subject of your family, I just wanted to insert a couple of things. Grandma Boyle had a great sense of humor, and his dad I didn't get to know too well because he died less than a year after we were married. He died in 1966, and but I think he was very smart, and he had a more dry sense of humor. But Dad's mom used to always say that they got their smarts from him and their sense of humor from her. So, and she had a few funny stories about. In those days, many women didn't drive, but your mother. So they waited for their husbands to come home from work to take them to the grocery store and stuff. So your mother did try driving once, didn't she?
She got lessons from somebody. I wonder if it was from Jack. In any case, she went for a little spin and wound up plowing into the back door of the butcher shop.
So she didn't drive anymore until after Grandpa Boyle passed away, and then she did get a little Maverick, I think she had, and took driving lessons. So she drove herself around a bit when she was a widow.
But so I guess maybe you're saying also some women from her generation never became comfortable with driving, or
right,
didn't drive a lot, right?
I
Didn't
had
have their
a
own
lot
car, usually one car per household. Or,
right, that's what they had.
Correct.
I had a lot of girlfriends' mothers who didn't drive. My mother was sort of ahead of her time. I want to say a couple more things about his family, but she was 28 when she got married, and my dad was 30, which was old for those days. And I think my mother had wanted to become a nun and then didn't do it and got a little older. She met my dad while they were, she was the organist at St. Mary's Star of the Sea Parish in Jackson, Michigan, and he sang in the choir. So that's how they met each other. But she had graduated. She went to St. Mary's College for 2 years, and then her parents couldn't afford it and then anymore, and she graduated from Detroit Conservatory of Music. So she kind of had her own job, and she bought herself a car. I think she had a Model T. When my parents got married, my dad didn't have a car. My mom had the car. And so she was used to driving from the time she was a teenager on. But I just want to go back to a couple of things from Dad's side. First of all, his mother, as he mentioned, was like I don't know if she was the oldest, but she was one of 6 children and had to help out. And Uncle Gus, who lived in Mount Vernon, Ohio, did not come to our wedding because his wife was in the hospital, Aunt Helen. So we took Dad's 1965 white Mustang hardtop and drove to New Hampshire for our honeymoon. And on the way back, we came to Mount Vernon, Ohio, and stopped to see Uncle Gus. I had not met him yet. Well, Aunt Helen was still in the hospital. So Uncle Gus taught me how to play poker. The whole family had a wonderful sense of humor. All of them did. Aunt Glad, everybody. And so he wrote everything, and I had that list for a very long time of what beats what in poker. And then when we went to visit Aunt Helen in the hospital, we were in the car, and the 3 of us, other was in the back seat. I was in the middle of the front seat. Dad was, well, a cat started crossing the street, and Uncle Gus started steering right toward the cat. I thought, oh no! and then he pulled away, you know, at the last minute. He thought that was very funny, but anyway.
So that was Grandma Boyle's brother?
Right. And then you all knew Aunt Glad. She was wonderful. And her husband died, and so the 2 sisters, his mom and Aunt Glad, used to get together pretty often.
They had twin sons, Jim and Jerry,
Yeah.
who became ambulance drivers for one reason: they liked to speed.
Anyway, Aunt Glad lived in Akron, Ohio, and I don't know if you will remember or not, but we took you kids to Cedar Point or something, and we went to visit Aunt Glad. Aunt Glad lived, she did not have much money at all. She lived in a basement apartment by herself, and she said, yes, come and stay here overnight. And it was a very small apartment. Well, the night before, she took her grocery cart, went up and got tons of food and brought it back. And in the morning, we slept. We had sleeping bags, and you kids slept all over the floor, and she played games with you on the floor. And in the morning, she made everybody bacon and eggs and stuff, and she read a lot of books. She used to read all the time. But anyway, she loved having you kids there as much as enjoying her own grandchildren. So
Their oldest son, Bill, became
oh,
a
yes.
became a Teamster organizer with a gold Cadillac.
He stopped to see us once when we were on Martina Drive, and you guys were all looking at it. I think it was a town car, actually, and it had gold trim. It had everything gold on it. And didn't he win a big settlement or something?
I don't know.
We're never sure right where he got his money. Didn't you call him the Don or something?
That was Jack's name for him.
Oh, Jack called him the Don.
So this is the oldest brother, the twins were the younger?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I think you all have nice memories of Aunt Glad too. Yeah.
When we visit there, our vacations consisted of going to Ohio and Pennsylvania. There was no going to the West Coast or going abroad. When we visit them in Akron, Ohio, a home that had a front going like this and like that, and it looked so pretty, the twins and I would get up around 5 or 6 a.m. and go to their nearby lake because they had goldfish that jumped a couple feet out of the water. I'd never seen anything like it. So, and then we'd go on to Pennsylvania to Crafton near Pittsburgh, and always without air conditioning. Sleeping upstairs was always a challenge, but the family was very cordial. They had something called iced coffee that I could never taste.
Why did your family move from Pittsburgh area?
Jobs.
Jobs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go where the jobs are.
Uh-huh.
And my dad was one of 6 children, and he was number 4. You all might remember the oldest, Aunt Eileen, who was a Sister of Charity. We visited her several times near Cincinnati, Ohio. And
Mother Teresa's order?
no, it's a Sister of Charity, but not that order. They're from Mount St. Joseph in Cincinnati, Ohio. And she taught school in Detroit. She taught school at St. Leo's, and think there's one other school she taught at. But anyway, there were 6 in my dad's family, and his dad died when his dad was only in his 30s from pneumonia. In those days, they didn't have antibiotics and things they have nowadays. And his mother was expecting. She was pregnant with her 6th child with Uncle Bill. I don't know if you remember Uncle Bill. He was, anyway. So my dad always worked, and he gave his money to his mother to help support the family. He was a caddy on a golf course, and strangely enough, he and Uncle Bill, who was the youngest, well, they were very much alike, but what?
Let me insert just briefly. He was a caddy on the golf course. He was caddying once for some executives or somebody. They teed off, and he watched the ball carefully. They walked and walked and walked. Got up there, they said, well, where's the ball, Ted? And he said, I'm not sure. It was under that cloud.
That's a story that Uncle Bill likes to tell about my dad. But anyway, but strangely enough, I started to say, Uncle Bill went, oh, we've got a carpenter bee in the camera.
He went right to the lens.
He's back. My dad helped his younger brother, who's 4 years younger, Uncle Bill, go to the University of Detroit. My dad didn't get the opportunity to go to college, but he started with a job with the New York Central Railroad as a clerk, and then he helped his brother graduate from the University of Detroit, which these days I don't know that people would do things like that, but they all just kind of survived and shared, what they had. So anyway, and then my mother was, she just had one brother, Uncle Carlton, who went to Notre Dame, who graduated from there, and she was 2 years behind him at St. Mary's and then finished up. And as I said earlier, they met at St. Mary's. My dad used to say, I guess he asked my mother out on a date several times, and she refused, because he said she knew if she went out with me once, she'd marry me. So anyway, and then he moved to Detroit with the railroad, and that's where he worked for like 47 years. He started when he was 18.
Detroit used to be one of the nation's top communities. It was lots of executives and lots of beautiful neighborhoods and all, and then we got into some mayors that had their pocket more important than the citizens. So the city began a downhill plunge. Now it is returning a bit, and we are supporters and think highly of the city because of the great launch that we had there as children.
Well, it's a good place to grow up. I had, as you know, 3 older brothers, Carl, Jerry, and David has passed away. Carl is now 81. He's the same age as Jack, Uncle Jack. And Jerry is almost 2 years behind him, and Dave was. And a younger sister, Anne Marie. We lived on a corner lot right across the street from a playground and tennis courts. And so we were busy all the time. And sports were not organized so much then. So we used to just go over to the park and hit a ball or play a little tennis, or and I had lots of girlfriends.
She got
in the
to
area.
be such a solid tennis player by playing 3 brothers all the time. So she got to hit the ball with authority.
Actually, Uncle Dave was the one who played a lot of tennis, and I used to go hit with him. So the trouble is, we never played games. So now when you're in altar or something, it has to be competitive. You don't hit the ball right back to the person. You're not supposed to, but I still do that. You're supposed to hit it away from them a little bit more. Anyway, it was a wonderful childhood, and I mean, I'm sure every family has its issues, but all in all, we had a good time. My mom used to play the piano. Everybody would gather around, and we'd sing songs. Anne-Marie and I know songs from World War I, my buddy. And
You used that one recently
yes, you did in our video.
to great advantage.
Mm-hmm.
The
And I went
I'm sure
to,
it was cold, right?
Oh, yes.
The
yes.
house probably didn't have the kind of insulation that they do now, or
Oh, I
Were you
think it was
cold,
fairly
Nora?
well insulated, but we had a coal furnace.
Coal furnace.
And then we finally got, I mean, my dad used to have to go down, open the furnace and shovel coal in. And then we finally got an automatic stoker, they called it, where you filled it up and then it would go in automatically. And my mother had her washing machine. Early on, it was one with a wringer, and that wasn't anything automatic. It would wash the clothes, and my mother would have to put every item of clothing through the wringers to wring it out, and then hang it up on lines. And in the basement, it was an unfinished basement. She had clotheslines and hang up all
you
the
have coal
clothes.
dust or aerosols in the air in the basement or upstairs or anything? Or?
I don't remember that
No.
at all. A lot of houses had milk chutes. Remember? We had
That's
milkman.
in the side of the house, there's a square cut out, and with a door on, you open the door, the milkman puts the milk in, and he leaves, and you open your side of the door and pull the milk in.
Mm-hmm.
Was that because you didn't have refrigerators, or?
No,
we
we
did. It
did.
was just a delivery system, because milk is sometimes needed quickly with raising kids.
And it didn't last as long or something because it wasn't homogenized, or?
No, it maybe didn't.
You know, I bet all these homes still have boarded up milk chutes.
Yeah, I bet they do.
I bet the milk tastes better back then. Was it creamier?
Oh yeah, they didn't have any low-fat stuff. The cream was on top. You had to shake it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, get the cream get it all together. And they were all glass bottles. There weren't any cartons or anything. And
Did you have ice deliveries as well?
we did at my grandma's house in Jackson. She had an ice box, but not my parents in Detroit. They were past the ice box stage then.
Okay.
But I remember visiting my grandma's house, and they had blocks of ice.
One thing that didn't help the city too much at all was called Dutch elm disease. There were so many elm trees in Detroit, and this disease went through and knocked them out one neighborhood after another. We once were out driving to visit a friend from WJR Radio in my high school, and this was his first home he was going to have with a fireplace. So we stopped on the way where they had been cutting down elm trees, and we picked up logs and put them in the trunk of my Mustang, took them to his house, Tom Campbell, WJR, and I said, this is your housewarming gift. Here are the logs. He said, oh, good, let's put them right in the fireplace. So he put them in the fireplace, we had a beer, we went home. Next morning they called and said, our house is now full of Japanese beetles. And we have 3 kids in diapers.
Yeah.
So we take the vacuum and we go over the draperies like this and scoop them, and by the time we got into the bottom, more have appeared.
We had to pay to have your house exterminated.
I said, you and I can split that 50-50, right? He said, you bet. I still haven't seen his check.
I bet it's getting late and you're going to get stuck in rush hour traffic. Mike.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there's a lot to talk
go to
about
that
still,
kind of
so
Yeah.
I'd like to do this again.
Yeah, there
Um,
is. Yeah, there is still 50 years worth or more.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it's actually, you're 75, 72, it's 147 years worth.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But I think you've done a great job.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
It's hard to get your mother to come out of her shell.